Firearm violence has been increasing in the USA for more than a decade. This increase has disproportionately affected communities that have historically been impacted through a lack of economic investment and the structural discrimination that severely limits opportunities to address this violence. Because of this, the field of firearm injury prevention is in particular need of community-based interventions to address these disparities, address structural causes, and find solutions for the people that need them the most. Welcome to the Community Firearm Violence Prevention Network podcast. We are an NIH-funded research network that focuses on collaboration between academic and community organizations to address the public health crisis of firearm violence, focusing on community-level strategies to prevent firearm injuries and death. In today's episode, we will discuss the development of the Community Academic Partnership and the research projects that make up the Community Firearm Prevention Network. Our guests today are Dr. Mark Edberg, a professor at the Milken Institute of Public Health at George Washington University, and Michael Wallace, president of the MINT Project and a co-investigator on the project in Washington, D.C. Can you introduce yourselves and explain how this community academic partnership developed?
I guess I could start. My name is Mark Edberg. I'm the PI for the project. I am a professor in the Milken Institute School of Public Health at George Washington University and also in the anthropology department. I'm a cultural anthropologist by training. And, in terms of our community partnership, I've known Michael for a while. He was a graduate student also at GW, and I've known him since then. So when this opportunity came up, I knew he had a nonprofit organization in DC, and so we started talking about setting up a collaboration for this in the community.
Yeah, my name is Michael Wallace, and as Dr. Edberg said, I studied under the tutelage of Dr. Edberg at George Washington University, studying for my master's in public health. I've worked in the field now for some years, serving the community after launching a nonprofit called MINT Project, MINT project.org. And our main mission is pretty simple. It's to feed the hungry, give drink to the thirsty, and clothe those in need. And so we got to get partnered with Dr. Edberg when I found out about the work that he was doing. Funny enough, I got to give a guest lecture at one of his classes, and he got to hear about my organization and the work that we're doing. And we talked, and I realized that I might be able to support the work that he was trying to accomplish in DC. And so I was confident that it would be a good project to work with.
What led you to be involved in this area of research?
My interest in this, or involvement of this, probably started when I was doing a lot of work with HIV risk populations in some of these same communities. And these communities were highly affected by violence. And so I started getting involved in various violence prevention projects. At GW, we first started experimenting with ways of addressing youth violence from a broad community perspective. And that was, at that time, it was with the Latino community around DC. And so we had some grants with CDC to do that, and then a follow-up grant from NIH to do the same thing. So we developed partnerships there and have been working with prevention of violence and other risk.
I lived in DC for almost 12 years. And at some point in my time there, I asked myself, what are you actually doing to make the community better? So I started working throughout the community, engaging with the city, using some of my public health skills that I learned, and started engaging, asking questions to the city about what they were doing here or why certain things weren't happening. I got pointed, the city was like, okay, we're tired of this guy, give him some work to do. And so they pointed me to the shelter, the youth shelter. And I started working with the youth shelter, and I've gotten to work with 100 plus homeless youth in DC. So I got to see so much working in the shelter. And it has really pushed me to go further and further upstream to try to solve some of those issues.
Can you describe the landscape of the communities that you are working with?
This is Washington Highlands. And what we found is that one of the biggest assets in Washington Highlands is churches. There's like 10 of them. Like it like creates like a little boat just surrounding the community. Unfortunately, there's always a positive and negative for us. One of the nicknames for the community is also boat, but it's not because of all the churches that make a boat. It's because of a drug that they call boat. And the youth were always explaining how that was like a weight on them, seeing that, seeing the garbage piling up in the community, seeing the drug use, and then ultimately seeing the violence. Just in that one neighborhood, we had a 14-year-old shot. We've had other kids that were known by our kids shot and killed. We've had gunshots go into the service center that we work in. Just random bullets just happen to miss everybody. And so it's sad, and the kids can sometimes lose hope. And so we don't want them to lose hope. And so having opportunities like Dr. Edberg, where he brought to us this changing youth narratives on firearm violence, gave us an opportunity to let the kids know that there is help coming, right? There is hope here and that people haven't forgotten about them.
To Julia Tutt. Everybody calls her Miss Cookie. She is head of the Washington Highlands Addition Housing Authority there in Washington Highlands. And she's an example of one of these sort of resources in the community that it's this fabric, elements of a fabric that are there despite all the violence and despite a lot of the fatalism that kids and adults feel. But she's there. She runs a little program out of a duplex in addition to all her work with the Public Housing Authority. And, she's known, she's like a community grandmother. And there are those resources. So it is a community that has that kind of history that Michael's been talking about, but there are these seeds and there are these elements of community fabric too that hopefully we can build on.
What do you see as the core need in this community?
Different trajectories, different things that kids could become or could envision themselves becoming. And that would be supported by the actual elements of the intervention, which are these tracks, these actual intervention tracks, which include training and helping kids move along those paths so that they can become those things. And that's what a lot of the phase one of our project was to doing. So it was drawing from previous work, working with the community, and they made plenty of comments about how realistic this model was and how we should shape it so that it made sense for the community.
You see this kind of intervention having an impact on the community?
I think it's pretty self-evident that we need role models, and that if you have good role models, good things happen, right? You get encouraged to do good things. If you have bad role models, then you get encouraged to do bad things. If it's hard to become a good role model, you run out of good role models. And if the good role models aren't getting any publicity, then no one knows about them. And so I think that, we just need to see good role models that are supported by community efforts. And I think the impact of community is that we'll have just that. Hopefully we'll have a good selection of good role models, not only at the older, more professional side, but even at the youth themselves becoming those role models.
Can you tell us what you think this kind of research project brings to the field of firearm violence prevention research?
Something that we had started thinking about in a couple of the previous interventions is that there's really there's not much of an evidence base for community, collaborative, multi-level programs like this. So when people go to that evidence base and say, oh, we've got to put in place an evidence-based violence prevention program, typically what they're going to get or what they're going to find are a lot of very specific conflict resolution training and just a whole range of very specific programs that may target one or two risk factors or a few aspects of the issue. But what we hope is that we can provide some evidence base for a program that is broader than that is looking at the integrated nature of the way in which violence is integrated in this whole, like we talked about, a community fabric. And so we are measuring not only outcomes and self-report violence, we're measuring outcomes of violence. We're also measuring whether or not the mediators that we think that the intervention will affect, mediators like, future aspirations or a change in the young person's belief in possible selves and so their belief in what the social norms are regarding firearms and weapons use, things like that, whether those things will affect the outcomes. it is our hope, of course, that this will provide this evidence that other communities facing similar situations can use.
How is being in a network supporting the work that you do?
I really enjoyed this network experience, I would say. Being able to meet weekly or monthly with different individuals from across the nation, being able to learn from different providers who I highly respect and give high regards to in their work in Tennessee and Mississippi and Chicago and other places. It really helps kind of ground my work and encourage my work. I got a bunch of people from different states, some conservative, some not, right, to come together on a document that will guide our work. And so I think that's a pretty pivotal experience. And that's probably a good model for other networks to work with.
So, kind of the social support, the intellectual support, and just kind of that shared mission, I think, are all things that a collaborative like this does. And so for me, I mean, if there's anything we can do that would provide that evidence and help other communities that are in that same boat, of which there are a lot, and also help those communities feel like what they know about their community and what they know about why things are in that community is valid. And that is an important basis for trying to address the situation. I mean, if anything we can do helps that, then hey, we've done our job.
Finally, can you tell us how other communities with high rates of violence will benefit from the work of this project if it is found to be successful?
I mean, going back to like the community fabric idea, if we could help any other community, I would just reiterate figuring out which threads or who would be those threads for that fabric to stay strong. And I think that's what we've done a lot of work to try to figure out. We've really gone deep into the community to figure out who are those pivotal and change making and grounded community change makers that we can actually work with that are going to be a part of keeping this sustainable, not just doing it once, but like keeping it running after we leave.
And of course, transferring this to another community is, it's not going to be a cookie cutter replication. It can't be, but you have a model and a pattern, hopefully. These are things to look for. These are ways in which to get that community input so you can make sure that the overall model, because the overall idea, would remain the same. At least so we think, in different communities. It's just the specifics of how it gets implemented might be a little different and who the players are. And that's what Michael was just talking about trying to identify the specific threads in the fabric.
I mean, I think we've really done a good job thinking what are the people whose hands are already in the community or should be in the community and any community like that.
Thank you both for explaining the projects and how it will make a lasting impact on the field of firearm violence prevention research. In the next few episodes, we will hear from the other research projects and learn about their planned interventions. Thank you for listening to the Community Firearm Violence Prevention Network podcast. To learn more about the Community Firearm Violence Prevention Network, go to endfirearmviolence.org.